Hello everyone, my name is Nick, and this week's plant of the week is Monstera deliciosa Albo Variegata, commonly referred to as the variegated Monstera. Some would consider this to be the holy grail of houseplants. Others might say otherwise. That is up for you to decide, but this is a very highly coveted houseplant, and it goes for a high price tag on the market, so I figured it's important for me to make a guide for anybody who is growing this in their home, or thinking about growing one in their home, or maybe you've just gotten one bestowed upon you, which is a big responsibility, so there's so many reasons why you need to know how to care for this houseplant, because it is very similar to a standard Monstera deliciosa in care, but there are some caveats, I would say. Which, starting with the care, the lighting is very important with this, of course, because it sports this white variegation in the leaves, which is why this houseplant is so highly popular. And because this is has the white variegation, it's lacking chlorophyll in these areas of the leaves, so that this isn't able to photosynthesize as well as your standard Monstera deliciosa. So you need to be sure to give this more light than your Monstera deliciosas would, but you still don't want to scorch them in the window. Just like a standard Monstera, if you threw this in a south-facing window, this thing would burn. These leaves would not react well. They're even more delicate. They're even more delicate because of their variegation. So I grow mine right off of my east-facing window. It could do totally fine in the east-facing window, I think. A north-facing window would be okay. A west-facing window will be fine. I would probably recommend pulling it off though, because sometimes that light in the window can be a little too scorching, but just more light than you would give your Monstera deliciosa, but not quite the sunlight that you would be giving like a succulent or a cactus. So very important to give it more light because it needs to photosynthesize more to be able to produce more foliage because it's not photosynthesizing as much. Makes sense. The watering, however, is very similar to a standard Monstera deliciosa. I let these dry out, I'd say like 50% of the way. If you go too much, these leaves will start to kind of curl in a little bit, so it'll be very visual with you, so it's not one that's just gonna crisp up and turn brown upon drought. However, I would not get to that stage, but if you're just trying to learn the watering regimen, you could just kind of wait till you see a slight droop in this houseplant, but I'm probably giving this a really good drink every like week to 10 days. I do have it in a terracotta planter, as you can see. The soil is a standard houseplant mixed with a bunch of perlite added. I don't think I really added any orchid bark or anything, as this is still just a Monstera deliciosa. It's just variegated, so it doesn't require the most complex of soil, but you still wouldn't want to put this in like a loamy mixture, still whatever a green Monstera would require, so I do have a good amount of perlite in this mixture to make the soil more aerated. As you can see, these roots are very thick and they don't mind a little bit of airiness. In fact, they prefer it as they're exploring their way throughout the soil and meandering their way around. But when you do water these, you want to make sure that you give them a really, really good soak. So I'll often bring this over to my shower now that I don't have it on the trellis anymore. I just have it stand alone by itself on a bamboo stake, which it's important to allow your Monsteras to climb, whether it's a bamboo stake like I have here, which is just kind of simulating if it was growing up something by holding it upright, or attaching it to a trellis. Like I mentioned, I had it on a trellis before, although it wasn't physically attached. I just had it plant taped to the trellis, or a moss pole, which these are definitely more inclined to root inside the home. This will allow the leaves to get more mature. You can see as it's working its way up, the leaves get more and more splits. This oldest leaf has no splits. This next one has one split. The newest leaf has two splits. So you can see how it goes. So in theory, as I'm continuing to grow this up and it continues to mature, it will be covered in splits, even though right now it's looking a little underwhelming for what you might see if you type Monstera deliciosa Variegata on Instagram. Just putting that out there. But in due time and with a lot of patience, I will have a very nice looking specimen. Just gonna take a couple of years. So for the humidity for these, you are fine with standard household humidity. You don't have to supplement extra humidity, but you should, because these are expensive houseplants and you should be trying to replicate what they would be receiving in a greenhouse or a botanical garden or in their natural habitat, which is higher humidity. I just haven't had an issue with it myself. I have had it for a couple of years, so perhaps it's acclimated, which when I did purchase this houseplant, I was supplementing a decent amount of humidity in my home, so I'm just putting that out there. In my home, it hasn't had an issue. I do not supplement humidity, but I would probably recommend, if you aren't doing it, at the very least, supplementing humidity in the wintertime when the heat kicks on, it can dry out our home immensely. This is going to do totally fine in that standard household humidity of 40 to 60%, but once the heat kicks on, it's going to drop a little below that likely, and this, especially if it's still getting used to your home, might not love that situation. So just something to bear in mind. Temperature, I wouldn't, I mean, Monsteras are pretty forgiving houseplants with temperature. I think they thrive from like 55 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit. I would not keep this outside in the cooler months just to be safe if you do live in an area like me, Philadelphia, where it gets very cold in the winter. So while you could put this outside in the summertime, it will probably allow it to grow even more to its fullest potential than it ever would inside your home. Do be very wary of those temperatures because, as I keep just trying to drive home, this is an expensive houseplant, highly coveted, so do your best to take care of it. It would suck to have this die overnight because you left it outside and there was a cold snap or something or other like that. Pests are absolutely something you have to keep in mind with Monstera deliciosas across the board. The spider mites love them, the thrips love them, particularly the new foliage, so just be very mindful, especially when it's having a new leaf come in as it's unfurling. Be sure to check it and make sure that there's no pests hiding inside, because this is the kind of plant that seems to like attract pests, at least in my own experience. When I first got into indoor gardening, my Monstera deliciosa just got torn apart by thrips, so I'm just very mindful with all my Monstera deliciosas. I will usually use systemic granules in the soil, which is just like a straight up pesticide if it's available in your country. I know it's not available everywhere, but it's a great way for me to just kind of not have to worry about it. I just use it preventatively, just mix it right in the soil, and it keeps them at bay. And last but not least, the toxicity for these. These are moderately toxic. I have a cat. I don't worry about it. She doesn't really nip on my plants, but this is a kind of houseplant where if your pet took a bite out of it, just like a bite or took a nibble or something, I would not be concerned. Their mouth just might get a little swollen and they would probably learn from the situation. But if they're persistent with chewing on this plant, I would probably consider keeping it out of reach because it's not great. Also, you don't really want your pets chewing on your plants. That can cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, depending on where you're purchasing it. So, you know, always a good tip, I guess. But that's going to do it for Monstera deliciosa, Albo Variegata, Variegated Monstera, the holy grail of the houseplant, some would say. Really a beautiful houseplant, no matter how overrated. I will admit I think it is. It is freaking gorgeous. Like, I understand why it's so popular. I just don't understand why it's so expensive. It's, to me, like the equivalent of a marble queen pothos, you know what I'm saying? Where a marble queen pothos doesn't cost any more than a standard pothos, but they also grow not really that slow. This one obviously only puts off a couple of leaves. For me, under my care, I'm sure in prime conditions it might grow a little bit more swimmingly. And I know that these are in production for being mass produced from like Costa Farms. Not necessarily the Albo, but like a very similar one, the Thai constellation, although we will see when that finally happens. I'm sure many of you know what I'm referring to. But yeah, in due time, this probably will not carry the price tag that it has. For now, I would recommend reconsidering if the price is ridiculously high, but I traded for this and many people have gotten good deals. In fact, fun small story before I finish up today. I had, back when I worked at the houseplant store, a guy came in kind of frantic because he was moving out of his house, I'm pretty sure, and he had this giant Monstera deliciosa variegata. It had like 3 different types of Monstera. I have no idea where he had it. He said he got it from like a family member, and it was just gigantic. It was probably like 10 feet tall at the time, and all he wanted was someone to get it out of his house. And I told him, I was like, that's a really expensive houseplant. Like, you might want to ask for some money. So he asked for $250, I'm pretty sure, which I couldn't do because I didn't drive. He lived in like deep Jersey and I'm in Philadelphia, and it was just not the time. It wasn't the moment as great of an opportunity as it was, but I pointed him in the direction of another plant store in Philadelphia, which I believe went and picked it up because I'm pretty sure they have it in their houseplant store, and it's like growing up to their ceiling, and they take cuttings of it and all that stuff, which is fabulous, which I'm thrilled because it looks amazing, and I'm really happy somebody in Philadelphia got a hold of it. But I'm just saying, it goes to show that if you're lucky, you can get a 10-foot variegated Monstera for $250, which is probably half the price of what something this size would probably sell for on eBay. So if you put it out there, the plant gods might just surprise you. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at phillyfoliage, subscribe to my Patreon for even more houseplant content, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.